Well, a very warm welcome to this Inside Digital webinar from Geraghty 9. Mental well-being and remote working are top of the agenda items at the moment, with an even greater focus on them with the current COVID-19 lockdown and the impact that is having. Addressing mental well-being, psychological safety in remote teams isn't something that happens naturally. It requires intentional focus and action, which is why today's webinar and discussion topic is so important, and we hope will be very helpful. My name is Andy Ross. I'm a partner at Geraghty 9. We are a consultancy that has as our purpose a desire to help organizations design and build new digital services and products. We are really pleased to have Tom Geraghty, who is Head of Technology at Morenich, share his insights with us. I have seen Tom give this presentation recently and know it will stimulate further thoughts and ideas, as well as providing practical applications that we can implement in our teams today. I'm just going to ask Tom a couple of quick questions in order for us to get to know him. I'll then hand over to him and he will share his research and insights, and there'll be a time for Q&A at the end. But maybe Tom, if I can just ask you first of all, if you could share a little bit about your background and your current roles, because you a man who seems to have managed to juggle about 5 different roles at the same time.
Hi Andy, yeah, thanks. So my name's Tom Geraghty. I'm currently Head of Technology at Morenich. We're a digital retail agency. And as you say, I've also got a few other roles. I do a bit of management consultancy for Q5. I'm CTO of a little startup called Identity. We do sort of identity protection management stuff, and I do a lot of work in speaking and consulting on high performance teams, particularly with a focus on psychological safety and technology teams. So yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. And how have you found the past few months under lockdown? I know you live near the beautiful Peak District, so you've probably had some advantages being able to get out, but how have you found the last couple of months?
Yeah, so we've actually found it. So from a practice perspective, we've found it quite good in many ways. It's so for Morenich, we were already partially remote. We had an office with a number of people in, but around half our workforce are already remote. So we were well set up to go remote from a technical and logistical perspective. But suddenly moving everyone remote and everyone being out of the office was a challenge, particularly for some of us in the organization who who have less than ideal home office environments, and there were some people who suddenly had to work off their dining room tables or their sofa or even their bed. So we've had to do a lot of work to make sure that everyone actually is set up to be able to work from home effectively, and level the playing field a little bit.
Brilliant. And what are you most looking forward to doing once lockdown ends and you're released back into the wild?
So I think we're already, we're going out for hikes and we're spending some time outdoors, which is pretty much our thing. But I think the biggest thing is just going to our local pub and meeting our friends.
Yeah, brilliant. That human touch is, I think, the thing we've all really missed, isn't it? You can't quite replicate that online.
Yeah.
And then finally, where does your interest in this subject and mental well-being and how high-performing teams develop psychological security, where did your interest in that subject come from?
Yeah, so this is a really good question. I think so I've been a team lead or manager for maybe nearly up to 20 years now, and in my early career I had a series of very poor leaders or managers for various reasons. In fact, one or two of them even got into the press for quite awful leadership practices, and it was that sort of thing that made me think there has to be a better way of doing this. I'm seeing really poor leadership practice here. There must be a better way. There must be the right way of doing this. I don't know what that looks like, so I'm going to go and find out what it is and practice it. And from there, and reading maybe about 10 years ago, almost some of Gene Kim's stuff from the Phoenix project, and sort of it's all spawned from there really. My leadership practice excellence and trying to do the right thing.
Well, Tom, we're very grateful to have you share your insights and experience and research. So thank you for doing that. I'm going to hand over to you now. Just to let people know, do stick questions in the chat box and the Q&A box, and at the end there'll be a time for us to ask those questions to Tom and pick up on anything else he's said. So Tom, over to you.
Thanks, Andy. I'll just want to check. You can see that screen, I assume?
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, I've already introduced myself, but if you go to tomgeraghty.co.uk, then there's a bunch of resources, including this talk and a load of articles about psychological safety and other leadership stuff if you're interested in reading any further. You can find me online on Twitter with that handle. So I always like to receive questions or feedback or whatever via Twitter. So if you want to take any screenshots or comment on it whilst in this webinar or afterwards, then feel free to do so. That would be really awesome. I'd like to stay in touch with everyone. Yeah, so I'm going to move on first to this boat. So this is an Arleigh Burke class guided missile destroyer of the United States Navy. This is one of the largest missile destroyers in the world. It's 155 meters long, weighs around 9,000 tons, and has engines boasting over 100,000 horsepower. And it has more than 100 missiles and torpedoes on board. If you wanted to buy one of these, it would cost you over $2 billion, but I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to buy one. And this is a Cray XE6 supercomputer. It has 154,000 cores. It runs at 1.3 thousand teraflops, which is a teraflop is a trillion floating point operations per second. So that's a pretty fast machine. This is at the National Energy Research Scientific Computing Center in California and costs just $70 million, which is rather affordable compared to the missile destroyer. These two things, this missile destroyer and the supercomputer, have something in common. They have one in common, in fact, and it's this woman. The USS Hopper and the Hopper supercomputer are both named after Grace Hopper, one of my leadership role models. Grace was born in 1906, and she gained a PhD in maths from Yale and became a professor at Vassar University. In 1940, she tried to join the Navy, but she was rejected because she was 34 years old. So she joined the reserves instead, and then began her computing career in 1944 when she began to work on the Harvard Mark I team. And it was Grace Hopper who was part of the team that popularized the concept of machine-independent programming languages. This led to COBOL, and this is the idea that humans should be able to read programming code as well as computers. During her life, she was granted 40 honorary degrees, and she became US Navy Rear Admiral, and she died in 1992. She also worked on the Mark II computer at Harvard, which incidentally weighed 25 tons and ran at 8 hertz. And in 1947, she found the first actual case of a bug in a computer, and this is a moth in relay 70 panel F, when she was trying to work out why this computer wasn't working correctly, and she found an actual bug, an actual moth in the relay, and sellotaped it to her notes, and you can see the first actual case of a bug being found there in her notes. She was a champion of improvement and positive change. She used to say humans are allergic to change. They love to say we've always done it this way. She had a clock on her wall, in her office wall, that ran counterclockwise, just to prove that you could do things differently. And she emphasized the importance of people being human, and that's why she's featured in this talk. She emphasized the point that leadership is far more important than simple management, but they're part of the same need to drive performance. Leadership and management must coexist, but they're not the same thing. You manage things and you lead people. And of course, she's absolutely right. We don't lead things or manage people. We lead people and manage stuff. We manage compliance, health and safety, planning, meetings, recruitment, costs, and stuff like that. We lead people through vision, motivation, taking accountability and responsibility, celebrating success, coaching, mentoring. So this is to say that management is part of leadership. Teams need a safe environment to operate and work in. They need to know what to do first, how to do it, and what not to do. So if you don't or can't manage costs, risks, workloads, and priorities, the team can't work effectively. You won't have the trust of the team, and trust is absolutely key to being a leader, and we'll come back to this soon. The team can't operate effectively in an environment where the things are not managed well, which means you absolutely must get the basics right. Fortunately, that's the easy bit. Leadership is far more difficult and far larger in scope. Everyone manages stuff, but not everyone leads. And possibly the most important thing that we do as leaders is this, and it's rarely mentioned. We ensure psychological safety for members of our team. This is also known as safety culture. And although Grace never used the term because the term came later, Grace Hopper called this belonging in a team. Fundamentally, it's about being able to speak up, whether it's speaking up about a critical safety issue or the behavior of a senior member of staff. And whilst I hope that all of you on this webinar work in environments where you could raise a health and safety issue, it's possible that you might feel differently about raising or speaking up about the behavior of a senior leader or similar. Now, this is Chernobyl. This is 1986. This is where the term safety culture first arrived. In Russia at the time, economic and political interests came far before safety. Hierarchy, authority, and blame for mistakes essentially caused this incident. The plant itself had an inherently unsafe design, but there was also a fear of authority and certainly no safety culture. And on the day of the incident, there was a safety test planned, which was to simulate a power cut to the operation controls of the plant. This test had been previously run many times, but never quite successfully. And on this day, it was delayed. And a second operational shift came on. And the members of that shift, the team in that shift, were less familiar with the system. But because there was a fear of authority and no safety culture, they couldn't raise their concerns. The test was executed, it went wrong, the team didn't know how to handle this failure, and that led to a catastrophic series of events culminating in 2 explosions, one steam explosion that destroyed the reactor, and one second nuclear explosion. On the day, directly, 31 people died as a result of this catastrophe. But in total, it's expected that around 4,000 people died as a result of this incident. And all fundamentally because engineers didn't feel safe enough to raise concerns to their manager. Now, subsequently in 1999, Dr. Amy Edmondson, who was a professor at Harvard Business School, was studying clinical teams. And she was studying the differences between high-performing and low-performing clinical teams, that is, the ones with good or less good outcomes. And she was looking at the performance of these teams and saw, well, in fact, the results showed that the best teams, the ones with most good outcomes, made more mistakes, and the ones with low performing teams, the ones with low or less good outcomes, i.e. more people dying, made fewer mistakes than the good teams. And that didn't make any sense at all. So initially, in fact, she assumed the data was wrong. So she went back and looked further at it and did some more research. But what she eventually found was that the best teams actually admitted more mistakes. It wasn't that they made more, but they admitted more mistakes. And the poorer functioning teams, the teams with lower outcomes, simply didn't admit their own mistakes. And through this concept, she came up with the idea of psychological safety, which is a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. It's about team members being able to express their creativity, talents, and skills without self-censoring or self-silencing. And it's about being fearless, literally fearless, not fearless in a dumb, I'm not scared to base jump off this skyscraper kind of way, but in a I actually have nothing to fear way. And it involves a great deal of trust. But it's far more than just trust in practice. Trust is kind of external. Psychological safety is very much an internal thing. So I'd like you to think about the best team that you've been part of. And chances are that team wasn't great just because, well, wasn't great because they were skilled, intelligent, hardworking, etc. Although maybe they were all those things. Chances are that team was great because they trusted each other and they felt safe to be part of the team and be themselves in that team. And now I'd like you to think about the worst team you've been part of, where you couldn't speak up, be yourself, trust each other, or rely on each other not to act in their own self-interest. And whatever your politics, I think it's safe to say that many of these people on this team are not feeling psychologically safe. There's not a great deal of trust, safety, or interpersonal risk-taking, or admitting that you're struggling when you're finding your work or personal life difficult. This is actually taken from an article about how to survive in Trump's cabinet. So let's look at the evidence. Why is it good to be psychologically safe? It might feel nice. It might feel really nice. It might be a nice thing to be part of a psychologically safe team, but does it actually matter? Does it actually make money? This is from Google's Project Aristotle. This is from 2012. And at the time, Google were researching what high-performing teams possessed, what made teams high-performing. And initially they found 4 different factors. First of all, they found that impact matters. Team members need to know that their work matters and creates change. Team members also need to have meaning. So the work needs to have meaning for the team members. It actually needs to have some personal meaning to individual team members. Crucially, they also need structure and clarity. Team members need to have clear roles, plans, goals. They need to know what to do and when to do it and what not to do. This comes back to management. And they also need to depend on each other. It's important to be, when you're part of a team, to be able to rely on each other as part of your team and trust each other that someone else is going to do their job as well as you're going to try and do yours. Now, what's interesting is that they established these 4 factors, but they knew that something was missing. There was still something different about the really high-performing teams. Teams that possessed all these 4 factors still had some variation in their performance. And someone on the Project Aristotle team found Amy Edmondson's paper from 1999 and decided to measure psychological safety. And it turns out that psychological safety is the one key thing that impacts high performance in Google's teams. Without psychological safety, no team could be high performing, even if they possess these 4 other factors. But that's not the only evidence. This is from the State of DevOps report, which has been carried out over the past 8 years, originally by Puppet and then Dora and now Google themselves. And this states that an organizational culture that optimizes for information flow, trust, innovation, and risk sharing is predictive of performance. So not only can psychological safety or safety culture prevent disasters like Chernobyl, but it contributes to software delivery performance, organizational performance, and productivity. And it shows that growing and fostering a healthy culture reaps benefits for organizations and the individuals on those teams. This is actually from the State of DevOps report. These are the contributing factors that boost productivity across an organization, across a whole organization. And it's things like useful, easy to use tools, having internal search, external search, having low technical debt, being able to recover from high periods of stress or intense work, so avoiding burnout. But crucial to all of these is the culture of psychological safety. That is, having a psychological safe culture improves productivity across an organization. But it's not just organizations themselves, it's also software delivery teams. So this is for software delivery teams themselves, where you need things like code maintainability, good monitoring, trunk-based development, deployment automation, the use of cloud, disaster recovery testing, lightweight change processes. But again, crucial to all of this stuff, crucial to performance in software delivery teams is a culture of psychological safety. And you will not achieve a true degree of high performance in software teams without psychological safety. Not only that, but psychological safety is entering the lexicon of certainly of the tech industry. This is Gene Kim's recent book, a sequel to the Phoenix Project. This is the Unicorn Project. And in it, he introduces the 5 ideals: locality and simplicity, which talks about software architecture and software code standards. Second is focus, flow, and joy, which is about the ability to do good work and focus on quality coding and work. Third is improvement of daily work, which is continuous improvement. Fifth is customer focus, which is one of the agile principles. But fourth is psychological safety. And my point here is that this is becoming a real thing. So more and more people, more and more organizations, more and more teams are looking at psychological safety as a way to improve the performance and ultimately return on investment for that team. Interestingly, there are some things that are not correlated with team effectiveness from the rework study. And this is relevant because what's happening right now with everyone suddenly going remote. Co-location of teammates is not correlated with team effectiveness. People do not need to sit together in the same office to be effective. You don't need consensus-driven decision-making. You don't need highly extroverted team members. It doesn't matter about seniority, tenure, or indeed workload size or team size. Although it should be noted that this is restricted to data from Google Teams only, which are somewhat limited. They have limits on workload size and team size, so there probably is a certain degree of an effect there, just not noted in the Google research. So we know it's good to have. We know we want it, we know we like it, we know that having psychological safety will return benefits for our business, but how do you know if your team possesses psychological safety? One great way of doing it is to work with these statements, measure agreement with these statements. And you can score these on a sort of 1 to 5 system using a survey like a type form. And in fact, once we get to the end, you can access a sample type form survey on my website, which has these answers in there. These questions in there. And they're questions like, if I make a mistake on this team, it is never held against me. It is safe for me to take a risk on this team. Do members of this team reject each other or others for being different? And is anyone left out? And this is really important. This is really important to measure as soon as you can. It's also important to measure fairly frequently because psychological safety can go up or down. And it also helps a lot to be explicit with your team about your goals. By asking these questions, you're saying to your team that we want to achieve greatness with these responses. Maybe we're not there yet, but we're going to try and get there. So once you've got your team to answer those questions, you know where you are, but how do you improve? Now, as a leader, this is entirely on you. You can't simply tell people they operate in a safe environment. You need to prove it. You need to model it. You need to believe it and act it and live it. This requires awareness and empathy and humility. First of all, you have to get the basics right. This goes back to management. People have to know what to do, how to do it, when to do it, what not to do, and what good looks like. What does quality look like? And a huge component of this is properly managing the flow of work to team members, making sure that the flow of work to team members is controlled, predictable, because uncontrolled, unpredictable flow of work is the biggest anti-patterns to performance. Secondly, break the golden rule. The golden rule being treat other people the way you want to be treated, but don't do that because it's nonsense. They're not you. Ask them how they want to be treated, and this might just be with simple conversations. You might just want to ask your team members how they want to be managed, how they want to be led, how they want to live their work life. You can also create things like personal README files, which team members constantly update, and so it's a kind of how to work with me on a day-to-day basis document. But treat people how they want to be treated. Be inclusive in decision making. Allow teams to contribute to decisions that affect that team. Provide autonomy wherever possible. But that doesn't mean That doesn't mean you need consensus. You can still command a team. You're still in charge, but as long as team members are included in those decision-making processes, they can own the outcome. They can own those decisions, and they'll be invested in the outcome. Define team values and behaviors. This is absolutely crucial, because without team values and behaviors, people don't know how to behave, what environment they do work in. Now, it can sometimes be tempting to, as a leader, to simply define the team behaviors or organization behaviors at a top level and tell the teams what their values are, what their organization values are. That's not great. That's not going to work very well. The best way to do this is to work with the teams, work with the people in the teams, and distill the values out of the team and get them to really own them. Only by distilling the team's values with them will they really own and engage with those values. Chances are they'll be the same values that you would have come up with anyway. From those team values, you can then establish a set of behaviors. And again, working with the team to define what those are. And for different teams, they're going to be different things. Some things are different, more important to some teams than others. For example, one of your team values might be trust or honesty, or being team-shaped, being a member of a team, or being a good team member. And some of those behaviors might be, as a result of that value, might be things like making sure you turn up to meetings on time, make sure you don't speak over other people in meetings, maybe making sure that you don't have your laptop open in meetings unless it's absolutely necessary. And by doing so, working with those behaviors with the team, people know that they operate in a predictable, safe environment. Hold retrospectives and do it properly. Actually look for this systemic root cause of failures or problems. Replace blame with curiosity. Treat every incident as a learning opportunity. And in fact, don't just hold retrospectives for failures, hold them for successes. When something goes really well, hold a retrospective for it and find out what made that happen, what made that go really well. And by doing this properly, by finding systemic root causes of failure, you take the emphasis off personal failure or personal mistakes, and you're genuinely finding the systemic root cause and approaching how to fix that in the future. Related to that is admitting fault and doing it first. And this is the reason why there's a picture of the red arrows behind this, because I was talking to a red arrows commander a few years ago who told me that after each sortie or mission or whatever they call it, they all walk off the runway. They park their planes and walk off the runway into the hangar, and they sit down. And the first thing he does is admit at least one mistake that he made. And what that means is that the rest of the team not only feel empowered and allowed to admit mistakes that they made, but they want to find a mistake. They want to admit a mistake because they want to emulate their commander, their leader. Invite feedback. This is so crucial because you need to know what you're doing well and what you could be doing better with your team. But in fact, I wouldn't suggest using the word feedback. I would ask for advice. Feedback is a rather past focused, rather negative focused phrase, whereas asking for advice, how could I do this better? How can I improve? Is a far more positive and future focused approach. Show vulnerability and show emotion. Part of psychological safety is being able to show vulnerability and emotion, but before your team are going to be able to do that, you need to model that yourself. However uncomfortable you might find that. And that doesn't mean bursting out into tears in front of the team, but it means admitting to your team if you're finding something difficult or if you're having a bad day. And it's okay to show emotion. It's even okay to show anger or upset. It's important that you model that vulnerability, that emotion, so that your team members can do the same thing. Almost on the flip side of that, be really firm with negative behaviors. And that might be going back to people speaking over each other in meetings, or it might be someone turning up late, or whatever those negative behaviors. It might even be bullying. But being really firm with those negative behaviors and being explicit with the rest of the team that those negative behaviors are dealt with firmly means that the rest of the team are safe from the bad behavior of others. You get the behavior that you tolerate, so don't tolerate bad behavior. Financial security. This is super important because financial security enables teams to enables team members to focus, because they're not worried about money, they're not worried about how they're going to pay their rent or afford their groceries. Financial security enables people to focus on the job at hand. Job security, on the other hand, allows risk-taking and innovation. And it's through risk-taking, innovation, and that potential to make mistakes without fear of being sacked that allows innovation and competitive advantage to occur. Finally, be patient. This takes a long time, and you will never reach perfect. This is not a task-oriented achievement. It's not a carry out these 10 steps and tick a box and say, right, we're now safe. I can go back to being command and control. It's a constant behavior. It's a forever change. So whilst you're building it, what does building it look like? Well, there are 4 stages. There's inclusion safety. This is the initial stage. This is analogous to Grace Hopper's belonging. We all want to feel included. That's number 1. We long to belong in a team. We need to be accepted in a team before we can be heard. This is just basic, safe to be a member of a team, psychological safety. The second stage is learner safety. This is with an increased degree of psychological safety. This means being able to ask questions, give and receive feedback, experiment, and make mistakes. With further enhanced psychological safety, you get to contributor safety. This means being able to participate, contribute your ideas, your suggestions, and use your unique experiences, talents, and abilities to suggest ideas, suggestions, and make a difference. And this takes a degree of safety because those ideas and suggestions might get rejected. They might not get accepted by the team. So it's only by a high degree of psychological safety that you can allow people to contribute effectively. And the 4th stage is challenger safety. This requires the most psychological safety, and this means being able to challenge the way we do things, or even challenge the leader, challenge the team leads, and challenge other members of the team to say, actually, I don't agree with that, or I think it's time to change the way we're doing that thing, and I have an idea about how to make things better. And that requires a high degree of psychological safety, certainly if you're going to challenge the way the leader suggests we do things. This is from a book Timothy R. Clark's 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, which I can highly recommend. Once team members have gone through these 4 stages, in fact, not once, but during this process, team members will become more and more happy. And of course, as we know, happiness precedes success. Very few high-performing teams are unhappy. But teams are not happy because they're high-performing. They're high-performing because they're happy. And yeah, to go back to the point about how long it takes to build high performance, it takes at least 6 months for a team to enter high performance, usually maybe 18 months or more. Maybe teams will never get there. This is the Tuckman model from 1965. This is relevant because teams go through this forming stage. This is finding roles, bonding, getting to know each other. That's quite a rapid stage. And then they go into storming. This is where strong leadership is required to set a direction, strategy, roles, values, and behaviors. This storming phase is where you need to carry out your values and behaviors workshopping exercise and distill those values and behaviors with the team. From doing that, teams move into the norming phase. And this is where you start to build psychological safety. This is where teams become more autonomous, self-directive, and you can build a culture of experimentation and learning from mistakes. And by doing that, you get to this performing stage. This is where teams exist in a continuous improvement phase and are safe to take risks, safe to innovate. What normally happens with teams, with many teams, is that teams cycle through this storming and norming phase because any change, anyone leaving or joining the team or organizational changes means that psychological safety and the teams cycle back through storming and norming. So you need a certain consistency of approach to get to performing, and it can take quite some patience and effort. But is psychological safety enough on its own? Well, I think the fact that I've asked that question means probably not. It's not enough to just have psychological safety. So take a look at this quadrant. Take a look at this diagram, sorry, and look at each quadrant. Now, I, and probably most of you, have been a member of teams in each of these quadrants. You and your teams can move around a lot in this quadrant over time and in different teams as well. Now, going up on the left-hand side, you've got psychological safety, increasing psychological safety to go up. Along the bottom, you've got motivation and accountability or drive, moving right. Now, if you imagine what it's like to be in a team with low motivation, low accountability, and low psychological safety, that team exists in an apathetic state. No one's really safe to try anything new, but equally there's no need to do anything particularly different or new. So this team can function okay, but it's never going to be high performing. It's not going to feel very good either. Moving right, however, with low psychological safety but high motivation, accountability, high drive, this is where anxiety exists. This is where high performance, highly competitive sales teams exist. The danger with this zone is not only that it feels awful and it's not very good for employees, but you lose employees at this point. This is where people leave the team, because why would you stay in a team that's in this state? If you look up to the top left, you've got high psychological safety, but low motivation, low drive. This is a comfort zone. And this might feel like a really nice place to be. This can be a very happy, comfy, lovely long-term team to be in. But you're not getting much done. You're safe, but there's no drive to push. There's no drive to continuously improve. There's no drive to improve standards or deliver quickly. So increasing that motivation, increasing that drive, but maintaining psychological safety gets teams into this high performance phase at the top right. And this is because psychological safety isn't about lowering performance or quality standards. It's about raising them, but removing risk, removing as much risk as possible from those people trying to achieve those standards. High performance means being able to fail fast. Some of the things to remember about this chart is that it's much easier to move down than it is up. It's hard to move up, but easy to move down, like snakes and ladders. Excuse me. So one of the strategies you can use is to take teams, if they're in this bottom level, to take teams into the comfort zone first. Move teams into the comfort zone, decrease that motivation and accountability and drive slightly, get them into a psychological safe state, and then increase drive to move them into high performance. Because the risk otherwise is that you increase drive and motivation at the same time as increasing psychological safety and risk moving into the anxiety zone. And of course, that's where you lose people. Where you lose people, they don't come back. So move up and then across rather than across and then up. You can also workshop this quadrant with your team. So you can put this on a wall, on a whiteboard or something, and ask your team members where they feel they exist at the moment. You can do this anonymously or as a team workshop. And then you can ask people on your team, where do you want to get to? Where do we want to be? And of course, we want to be in high performance. So then you can have a good explicit conversation about how to get there. How do your team want to move to that point? And that can be a really powerful thing to do. I'm going to skip that slide and that one, but I'm going to talk about this one. So this talks to resilience engineering and DevOps, the approach of DevOps to build automated, safe systems that can respond to changes, respond to load, fail safely, and scale for demand. This is the whole DevOps approach. And what's interesting about the DevOps approach is that it intrinsically improves the psychological safety of technology teams. Because imagine you're working on an old, complex, monolithic, poorly documented system. You need to make a change to production, but you're not confident about the blast radius of some unintended consequences of your change. You don't feel psychologically safe. But if you're working on a system that has built-in tests before your code goes live, so it won't even let you make a change to the system that's going to break it. Or if it does break it, then it fails safely and recovers itself. And you've got full observability, full monitoring. So you know if something's going wrong and you can revert your changes. What that means is that not only do you feel safe in making those changes, but you're not going to be blamed for failure, because the system should heal itself. The system should work with you and protect you from making those changes, making unexpected changes. We're just going to talk quickly about psychological safety and distributed teams, because we've all suddenly gone remote in the past few months, and this impacts psychological safety in many different ways. So first thing to do is set the stage. We're all going through difficult times, whether it's financial concerns or dealing with the mental load of what's happening in the world. And it's important to be honest with your team about this, be explicit about the challenges ahead and show your vulnerability. It's a key part of, as we said, it's a key part of building psychological safety, but be positive and enthusiastic about facing those changes. Secondly is making sure everyone knows what to do. And of course, we keep coming back to this. It's about managing well. This is making sure that people know what to do, when to do it, and what good looks like. It's far more difficult for people to ask for advice or assistance when they're remote, and self-doubt creeps in quickly. So make sure team members know what's expected of them, and make sure that workloads and deliverables are realistic. Focus on outcomes rather than outputs, because outcomes matter more than anything else. Outcomes are things like satisfied customers, revenue generated, uptime, or something else. But focus on that and make sure the team remain focused on it. Resist the temptation to revert to more traditional kind of lazy styles of management by measuring outputs like lines of code, story points written, emails sent, or meetings attended. And really resist the temptation to avoid falling back to input-driven management by logging hours worked, because we already know that's a route to reduction of psychological safety and the last thing that a distributed team needs. So keep your team focused on what really matters to the business, because then team members can know that their hard work makes a difference. Build a culture of appreciation. And because when we're all in the same place, when we're all in the same office, appreciation and thanks are much easier to communicate. They tend to be passive. You tend to thank people without even intending to. But with distributed teams, much more effort needs to be made to explicitly show that team members are valued and appreciated. This means communicating in multiple ways through video calls, emails, and instant messaging. It's very easy to forget how often we thank each other when we're co-located. So build that culture of explicit appreciation to build psychological safety. Embrace routine and ritual. This is really key, because the dramatic shift in our ways of working has resulted in a disruption to our routines. Our start and finish times, regular meetings, lunch breaks, they've all been disrupted. Routines help us as humans feel more comfortable and safe when the world around us is changing and there's so much uncertainty elsewhere. Ritual also plays a really important role in team cohesion and psychological safety, particularly with distributed and remote teams. So whatever your rituals and ceremonies, from ringing a bell at a sprint kickoff to having an end of week drinks on a video call, keep doing them in order to build psychological safety. Establish work boundaries, because work has invaded our homes and our personal space, our personal home and time. It's very easy to allow work then to spread out in a physical and temporal space, particularly if strict boundaries aren't set. So help your team set these boundaries and enforce and model them. This may be ensuring that team members can turn off their phones after a certain time without worrying about missing messages. Or you might want to purchase home office equipment so they don't need to work from their kitchen table. This is crucial for psychological safety, because team members need to be able to remove themselves from work and maintain their own personal home and family space. Use various species of video call. Video calls aren't just for meetings. Bring back the feeling of cohesion and togetherness that's so important for psychological safety by using things like good morning meetings, or having an always on water cooler style meeting where people can just drop in and out as desired. This helps people feel more connected to teammates and will build psychological safety. Be actively inclusive or risk being passively exclusive, because in an office setting, it's easy to see if someone's not engaged or is pulling away, but with a distributed team, it's far more difficult, particularly on video calls. And this comes back to contributor safety. Everyone needs to contribute if the team is to achieve high performance. So if you're not being actively inclusive, you risk being passively exclusive. So invite participation, ask questions, and always ensure that someone has spoken at least once, everyone has spoken at least once before ending a meeting. Adopt Hanlon's razor, and this is in Germany in 1774, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe wrote in The Sorrows of Young Werther, misunderstandings and lethargy perhaps produce more wrong in the world than deceit and malice do. At least the latter two are certainly rarer. That is to say, it's important to assume the best intentions. If an email or a message comes across as rude, blunt, or offensive, assume that there was a miscommunication or misunderstanding, And if in doubt, ask for clarification, ideally via a video or voice call. And to avoid others falling into the same trap with your communication, embrace emojis and GIFs, even if they're not your usual style. Emojis and GIFs and things maintain psychological safety by ensuring that your communication is received in the most positive way possible, in the way that it's intended. But finally, put your own oxygen mask on first. If you're struggling with your own psychological safety, you won't be as effective in helping others with theirs. That might be finding a mentor, it might be eating healthily, exercising, meditating, taking time away from work, whatever that looks like. But if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after others. So psychological safety, it's still unusual, it's still not the norm, but it's becoming more so. And it's why it's one of the few things that can endow a competitive advantage for your team and your organization. So even if you're not in charge of your team, you can begin to foster these behaviors in this culture by doing three things. First of all, framework is a learning problem, not an execution problem. The outcome of work should be knowing how to do it better next time. Secondly, acknowledge your own infallibility. You might be an expert, but you don't know everything and you get things wrong. And if you admit it when you do get things wrong, you allow others to do the same. Finally, model curiosity. Ask a lot of questions. This creates a need for voice because by asking questions, people have to speak up. Grace got rejected by the Navy and nobody had to tell her that she was leadership material in order for her to become the amazing leader that she did. So you don't have to be told you're a leader to be a leader. So that's it for me. Thanks for listening to me today. If you send an email to tom@sendyourslides.com with the subject line performance, you'll get a whole load of stuff, links, and all sorts of resources about psychological safety. And most of the stuff I've referenced in today's talk, and you'll get that straight in your inbox. So thanks again. And I think it's now time for QA.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. That's absolutely fantastic. We've had some questions come in, but if people have further questions, please drop them in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll put them to Tom. But Tom, thank you. One of the questions that's come in is a question around how you build trust in remote teams. The question actually is, how long does it take to build trust in remote teams? But you might also just want to share some thoughts around how you do actually build trust in a remote team when you can't meet physically.
Yeah. So I think a lot of that comes back to this stage, this slide rather, which is all the standard, which is all the stuff we talked about in psychological safety. But in terms of how long it takes, I think that's almost an impossible question to answer. I think what I can say is that it is possible, and it will be quicker if you approach it in the most positive and constructive way possible. But in many ways, building trust in a remote team is the same thing you would do in a co-located team. So if we go back to this, it's about all these things. You can still do all these things in a remote team, retrospectives and decision making and inviting feedback. So yeah, it's about doing all this stuff, but being patient. It does take a while.
Great, thank you. And then another question that's come in, Tom, is can you give any examples of teams that demonstrate these behaviours particularly well, that I guess may be familiar with us, that we would know?
That's a really good question. I think, in fact, so one of the reasons this slide is up, because this is the Great Britain track cycling team. My friend Chris Ferber was their coach for a long time, and I think it's interesting because these guys have to be psychologically safe because they're pushing themselves to the limit every single day, and they're riding on fixed gear bikes with no brakes, clipped in on a splintery wood floor with rock hard tires and going at about 50 miles an hour with about an inch between them. So these guys, if you're looking for great examples of psychologically safe teams, it's often good to look at high performing sports teams. In fact, if you look at any high performing team, whether they're a sports team or a software delivery team, there's a very good chance that they possess a great deal of psychological safety.
Great, thanks, Tom. And another question that's come in says, you don't mention eliminating team members. sometimes a team member is so damaged by previous experience that their presence damages the whole team. Surely sometimes it is best, brackets with the greatest respect, to just eliminate them. I guess that means to, take people out of a team or remove them from a
Yeah.
team.
Yeah. So, and there's an interesting point here, and so that's absolutely right. And I've done that in the past because sometimes you do have one member of a team who is for whatever reason toxic, and I guess that's what I mean when I'm saying being firm with negative behaviors. Because if whilst being firm with that behavior, that team member is still doing it, is still behaving in that way, and there seems to be no other way around it, remove them from the team, because ultimately that team needs to be safe from them. The converse of that is really interesting, which comes back to this. Individual performance of team members is not correlated with team effectiveness. That is, sometimes it can actually be worthwhile to get rid of your rock star team member. You can sometimes improve the performance of the whole team by removing that one rock star dev or whatever they are that believes, maybe truthfully, that they are better than everyone else. So sometimes it's not just the low performers or the troublesome ones you might want to get rid of or move to a different team. Sometimes it's those rock stars.
Which is why I think a lot of big famous sports teams have policies around that. I don't think New Zealand All Blacks have a particular, phrase around removing individuals who are complete idiots and effectively they might be the best player on the pitch, but if it ruins the team ethos, they sort of remove them from the squad.
Yeah.
Another question that's come in is around, I guess along sort of similar lines. As well as being leaders, we're all also part of teams. How can we ensure psychological safety when we are team members?
So I think, so that's a really good point. And I think that's kind of my point at the end. You can do a lot of this stuff. You can invite feedback, you can admit fault, and things like that by being a team member. But in many ways, you don't have to be told you're a leader to be a leader. And if you frame these things right, if you behave, if you practice this psychologically safe behaviors, things like framing work as a learning problem, acknowledging your own infallibility, and modeling curiosity, you will that will feed out to the rest of the team and outside the team as well. So it's about these behaviors that you can do whether you're a leader or not. It is harder, granted. It can be harder if you're not a leader of a team to do that, because your leader might not be doing the same thing, but you can do what you can.
Tom, sadly, we've I think reached the end of our time. I could talk to you far longer on this topic. It's absolutely fascinating, and your research and your the work you have done to understand the topic is invaluable. So thank you very much for sharing it with us and your time this morning. Thank you everyone for joining as well. We hope you found it useful. If you're interested in more events and more topics, then please do check out the Geraghty Online website. There are further events and topics that may be of interest. Do register and sign up for those. And hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be able to hold some of these events physically and we'll be able to meet in person. But for now, thank you very much for joining. Thank you once again, Tom, and hopefully see you all soon.
Thank you very much. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, Tom.